What directs your mind? I mean, really directs it towards things. And what's that unseen power behind your speech, your sight, even your hearing? Let's just dive right into that because, well, it's a huge question, and it's right at the heart of the wisdom we're looking at today.
Yeah, those are pretty much the opening lines, the big questions from the Kina Upanishad. That's our focus for this deep dive. It's a really vital text. It's the 9th chapter, actually, in the Talavakara branch of the Samaveda.
Ah, okay.
You might also hear it called the Talavakara Upanishad, or, just Kina Upanishad for short.
Right, Keen Upanishad. And just for context, the Upanishads, they're often called Vedanta, right? Which sort of means the end or the culmination of the Vedas.
Exactly, like the completion of that whole sacred revelation.
Yeah.
They're considered Shruti.
Shruti, that which is heard.
Believed to be this profound wisdom that ancient sages, well, they sort of perceived it directly.
Yeah.
In deep meditation.
Wow. So really foundational stuff.
Absolutely. And the Kina Upanishad itself, it's quite concise. Just 4 chapters, 34 verses in total.
Short, but sounds like it's dense.
Oh, definitely. Don't let the length fool you. Yeah. Its core theme, it really packs a punch. Know that alone is Brahman.
Know that alone is Brahman. Okay, so our mission today then is to really try and get under the skin of this concept, Brahman. We'll use the Upanishad's own questions, the answers it gives, and there's a really interesting story in there too, right?
Yes, a very illustrative one.
The goal being to pull out those key insights for you, listening in to, well, maybe get a deeper sense of your own self and what reality is ultimately about.
And to make sure we're thorough, we're drawing on a few perspectives. Reflections from Swami Guru Bhaktananda, who based his thoughts on Swami Tejamayandaji's lectures, plus the classic commentaries, Adi Shankaracharya and Ramanuja as well, seen through Sridhar Shastri Pathak's interpretation.
So multiple layers of wisdom. Sounds good.
It gives us a richer picture, definitely.
Okay, let's jump into chapter 1 then. It tackles the nature of Brahman head on. Starts with questions from a disciple, yeah. What are they asking?
So, verse 1.1, straight away, 4 big questions the disciple asks. What wills and directs the mind? What commands our vital life force, our prana? What makes speech happen? And what intelligence is behind the eyes and ears?
You can tell straight away this isn't someone worried about, everyday problems.
Not at all.
These are fundamental, the driving force behind everything we do and perceive. They're really looking for something deeper, something lasting.
Precisely. And Shankara's commentary, especially on that first question about the mind, it's really sharp. He asks, is the mind in charge? Or is something controlling it? Because if the mind was fully in control, why would it ever think harmful thoughts? Why would we do things that aren't good for us?
That's a really good point. It opens up the idea that maybe there's something else, a deeper consciousness.
Exactly, something enlivening the mind.
Which forces you back to that core question, doesn't it? Who am I? Am I just this bundle of thoughts, feelings, this body? Or is there something more, this consciousness making it all possible?
That's the crux of it. It's the fundamental inquiry. And it connects directly to anyone seeking self-discovery.
So how does the guru respond? Verse 1.2.
Well, the guru gives an answer that initially sounds a bit like a riddle, maybe even wordplay.
Okay.
The guru says, it is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind. It is the tongue of the tongue, and also the life of life. It is the eye of the eye.
Right. Ear of the ear, mind of the mind. My first reaction is, okay, what does that actually mean? It sounds kind of repetitive.
It does, doesn't it? But it's not just repetition for effect. The key here is about shifting perspective. The student probably sees Brahman as something external, something out there to be understood.
Ah, like an object.
Exactly. But the guru is using this paradoxical language to point inward, to suggest Brahman is the very essence of our senses, of our mind, the inner subject.
So not the physical eye, but the power behind seeing. Not the thought, but the consciousness in which the thought appears.
You got it. Like the electricity that powers the bulb, not the bulb itself.
Okay, that makes more sense.
And Swami Guru Bhaktananda points out something really clever about the grammar here, too. The verse mixes up words usually used for objects with words used for subjects.
Deliberately infusing.
Sort of. It creates this intellectual tension. It forces the student to stop and think. Is Brahman what I perceive, or is it the power of perception itself, the subjective core?
So the riddle is actually a teaching tool. And the verse ends talking about transcending I-ness, our ego, and sensory life to become immortal. How does the ear of the ear idea lead to that?
It's by realizing that the Atman, our deepest self, is this Brahman. It is the ear of the ear. When we see beyond our limited ego, beyond the constant pull of the senses, we start to glimpse our true nature, which is eternal.
A really powerful link. Okay, moving on. Verse 1.3a seems to throw up another challenge.
It does. It states very plainly that the eye, speech, and mind, they just can't reach Brahman,
Yeah.
and that we don't have any real detailed knowledge of it.
Ooh, that sounds discouraging. If the very tools we use to understand the world, our senses, our mind can't grasp it, where does that leave us?
Yeah, it's a big hurdle. It highlights that Brahman isn't knowable through ordinary perception, what's called pratyaksha pramana. The teacher's being very honest here about the difficulty. You can't just stick the Atman in a test tube, you know. Swami Guru Bhaktananda has that funny line about Atman sulfate. It's not like chemistry.
Huh. Good analogy. So if we can't see it, speak it, or think it completely, how do we approach it at all?
This is where Shankar's commentary is crucial. He stresses that knowing Brahman comes through traditional instruction, from a guru, a preceptor who has realized this truth themselves.
So it's not just about thinking really hard or arguing about it.
No, not primarily through intellectual effort alone.
Mhm.
Guidance from someone who's been there is key.
That really highlights the importance of the teacher-student relationship in this tradition. Okay, then verse 1.3b adds another layer, known and unknown. What's going on there?
Verse 1.3b says, that is surely distinct from the known, and again from the unknown, it is above.
Distinct from the known and above the unknown. Sounds like we're being told it's neither this nor that. How do you make sense of that?
Well, distinct from the known basically means it's not an object like other things we know. We can't pin it down, categorize it in our usual ways.
Okay.
And above the unknown suggests it's even beyond things we normally think of as unknown or unseen, like maybe abstract ideas or forces. It transcends that whole known-known spectrum.
So it's in a category all its own, and the verse ends by saying,
It concludes, thus have we heard from the preceptors of the past. Again, emphasizing that this understanding comes through that lineage of wisdom passed down by those who realized it.
Right, trusting the transmission. Okay, now the next few verses, 1.4 to 1.8, they keep hammering home this idea of Brahman as the illuminator. What's the main thrust?
Yes, each verse takes one faculty speech, mind, sight, hearing, even prana, the life breath, and states that Brahman is the power behind it, the force that makes it function. And crucially, each verse ends with the same powerful line. Know that alone is Brahman, and not this which people worship here.
That phrase really jumps out. Not this which people worship here. What is this? What's it contrasting Brahman with?
That's a really important distinction the Upanishad is making. This refers to, well, other forms of religious practice common at the time, things like karmakanda rituals aimed at getting specific results, worldly gains, or a better afterlife.
Okay.
And also upasanakanda, the worship of specific deities or symbols, often also for particular benefits.
So it's saying Brahman is deeper than those specific practices or forms.
Exactly. It's saying, while those might have their place, don't mistake them for the ultimate reality. Brahman is the fundamental support, the source energy, not the particular manifested form or the ritual aimed at a limited goal.
Like our electricity analogy earlier, the power source, not the individual appliances.
Precisely. And Swami Guru Bhaktananda brings up a potential objection someone might have. If Brahman is our true self, how can we, as limited individuals, perform actions, worship gods, seek blessings?
Yeah, that seems contradictory.
These verses clarify that Vedantic sadhana, this path of realizing Brahman as the self, is different. It's not focused on those symbolic forms or external goals in the same way. It's about knowing the source.
Got it. It's a shift from seeking from something external to realizing the internal source. And you mentioned earlier, even the word Brahman isn't Brahman. That's still bending my mind a bit.
It is tricky. The idea is that any concept, any word, is still a product of the mind. Brahman is the pure consciousness behind the mind that thinks the word Brahman. There's a great saying from Ram Dass Swami, think of the unthinkable without becoming a thinker. It points toward that state beyond thought itself.
Wow. Okay, chapter 1 has definitely given us a lot to chew on. Let's move to chapter 2. It digs into the subtlety of actually knowing Brahman. Starts with the teacher checking the student's understanding.
That's right. Verse 2.1, the teacher asks the student, essentially, so do you think you get it now? And the student replies, maybe a little too quickly, I think I do know Brahman well enough.
Uh-oh. Sounds like potential overconfidence, like when you nod automatically in a meeting but haven't really processed it all.
Exactly like that. The teacher senses this might be just, intellectual understanding, not depth realization. The Pasha warns against this. The teacher points out, look, if you truly knew Brahman as your own self, your innermost reality, would you still refer to it as that in the third person? Like it's something separate from you?
Good point. It implies distance. So the students grasp the concept, maybe, but hasn't had that internal shift. The teacher pushes for more reflection.
Yes, prompts further inquiry. And after that deeper thought, the student comes back in verse 2.2 with something really quite profound.
What do they say?
The student says, I do not think that I know it well enough. Not that I do not know. I
Mm.
know and I do not know.
Wow, I know and I do not know. That's incredibly honest, paradoxical, but feels very true to complex experiences. Why does Swami Guru Bhaktananda rate this verse so highly?
He calls it exceptionally beautiful, really insightful, not just in this Upanishad, but across all Upanishadic literature, because it perfectly captures the feeling. This kind of knowing isn't like knowing facts or objects. It's different. There's this humility, this acknowledgement that it transcends our usual way of understanding.
It really speaks to the limits of language and intellect when facing the ultimate. How does the teacher react to this more humble response?
The teacher confirms this understanding in verse 2.3, saying basically, he understands it who feels he knows it not, and he understands it not who feels he knows it.
Another paradox.
Right. It is unknown to the master scholar, but known to the one who admits he does not know.
So true understanding comes bundled with humility. Knowing you don't fully grasp it intellectually is actually closer to the truth than thinking you've got it all figured out.
Precisely. It contrasts that sort of scholarly arrogance, I've read all the books, I know it all, with the genuine insight that comes from recognizing the vastness, the mystery. Humility is key.
It's a good reminder that this path isn't just intellectual gymnastics. Okay, verse 2.4 seems to explain this truth a bit more. What does it highlight?
Verse 2.4 talks about intuiting Brahman in every thought and every modification of the mind, and that this leads to attaining immortality, real inner strength, atmic strength, and divine knowledge. This verse really lays out the difference between a knower of Brahman and someone still in ignorance. It's about inner qualities.
Seeing the self in all thoughts. How does that work in practice? It sounds difficult.
The Bhashya gives a great analogy. Think of the self as the constant witness behind all your thoughts, like the clear sky behind passing clouds.
Okay.
The thoughts, clouds come and go, they change form, but the consciousness, the sky, remains constant, pervading them all. It's always there.
So the content of thought changes, but the awareness witnessing it is constant. I like the sky analogy better than the physics equations.
Huh, yes. Swami Vidyaranya also used that sky analogy. Consciousness is unaffected by the thought clouds drifting through it. And the verse suggests that by focusing on that constant consciousness, recognizing that as your true nature, you become steady, you attain that immortality.
Immortality, not as living forever in this body, right?
No, Guruji clarifies that. It's about being established in that Brahmic consciousness,
Yeah.
liberation while living Jivan Mukti, and eventually liberation from body consciousness altogether, Videha Mukti.
A very different idea of immortality.
Yeah.
And verse 2.5 then seems to really drive home the importance of this realization.
Yes, it glorifies the truth by emphasizing the urgency. It says you must know Brahman in this life to gain its true purpose. Otherwise, there is Mahati Vinashti, a very great destruction or loss.
Very great destruction. That sounds serious. What kind of destruction or loss are we talking about?
It refers to the suffering that comes from ignorance, from constantly chasing worldly things, temporary pleasures that inevitably crumble and leave us feeling lost or unfulfilled. It's the cycle of suffering born from forgetting our true self.
So the Dhira, the wise person mentioned.
Yes, the Dhira is the one who wisely turns away from those fleeting temptations and surrenders to the divine, seeking that lasting truth within. Failing to do that just leads to endless disappointment.
It's a stark choice. And the chapter ends by looping back to the words from verse 1.2.
It does, which signals, the formal conclusion of this section of the teaching, bringing it full circle, but hopefully with a much deeper understanding now.
Definitely. Okay, we've covered the nature of Brahman, the subtlety of knowing it. Now chapter 3 shifts gears with the story. The humiliation of the gods. This sounds intriguing.
It's a fantastic story. Really serves as a clear illustration of a key point. How the sense of doership, thinking I am the one doing things, I am in control, leads straight to pride and, problems. The setup is a battle between the devas, the gods, and the asuras, the demons.
And the gods win, presumably.
They do. But that's where the trouble starts. They get incredibly puffed up with pride about their victory.
Forgetting where the power actually came from.
Exactly. They acted like they won it all by themselves, completely forgetting that the victory, their power, everything, ultimately belongs to Brahman. Classic ego trip.
So Brahman decides to teach them a lesson.
Precisely. Brahman appears before them, but not as Brahman. as a mysterious, adorable spirit, a yaksham. The goal is to humble them, gently pop that bubble of pride.
An adorable spirit. Okay, so the gods see this yaksham. What happens next?
Well, first they send Agni, the god of fire. He's often called the all-knowing one, so they figure he can identify this spirit.
Makes sense.
Agni goes up, full of confidence, boasting, "I am Agni. I can burn anything on earth."
Okay, setting himself up.
Totally. The spirit just holds up a single tiny blade of grass and says, "Okay, burn this."
Mm.
Agni tries with all his might, puts all his divine firepower into it, and nothing. Can't even singe the grass.
Wow! The god of fire foiled by a blade of grass. That's humbling.
Completely humiliated, he goes back to the other gods, head hanging low, admitting he has no idea what that spirit is.
So who's next?
Next up is Vayu, the god of wind, the lord of the wind, Matarish Van.
Another powerful elemental force.
Same story. Vayu approaches, boasts about his power. "I can blow anything away." The spirit presents the same blade of grass. "Move this."
Let me guess.
You got it. Vayu huffs and puffs with all his cosmic wind power, and the grass doesn't budge an inch.
Incredible. So Vayu also returns, defeated and confused.
Defeated, humbled, and clueless about the spirit's identity.
These two fundamental powers, fire and wind, shown to be utterly dependent. The message is getting clearer. Who do they send last?
Finally, they decide to send the big boss himself, Indra, the chief of the gods.
Okay, Indra approaches.
But just as Indra gets near, poof, the spirit vanishes, disappears completely.
Oh, so Indra doesn't even get the blade of grass test.
Nope. Instead, right where the spirit was, Indra encounters Uma Haimavati, a radiant goddess, the daughter of the Himalayas. He's baffled, obviously, and asks her, "Who was that adorable spirit?"
So the leader of the gods meets Uma instead. That feels like a turning point.
It absolutely is, and Chapter 4 really unpacks the meaning of this story, with Uma playing the key role in revealing the truth.
What's the core takeaway, the moral of the story?
Well, the obvious moral is, always remember you're an instrument. Claiming doership, thinking you are the source of power and success, it just leads to pride, ego, and eventually a fall. You have to acknowledge the higher power.
Connects directly to the individual ego, right? The jiva in us forgetting that God, or Brahman, is the real controller of our mind and body.
Exactly. The god's pride is a macrocosmic version of our own individual ego forgetting its source.
So what does Uma tell Indra? What's the big reveal?
Verse 4.1, Uma says it straight, "I am Brahman indeed. Through Brahman's victory alone have you gained this greatness."
Boom. There it is.
Through her words, Indra finally gets it. That mysterious, powerful spirit was Brahman. Their victory wasn't theirs alone. It was Brahman's victory, achieved through them.
A profound realization. And the Upanishad then explains why Agni, Vayu, and Indra were specifically involved.
Yes, verse 4.2 suggests they sort of surpassed the other gods because they got closest to the spirit, and they were the first ones to learn through this whole experience that it was Brahman. It implies kind of hierarchy based on that closeness to realization.
And Indra is singled out even more.
Verse 4.3 emphasizes Indra's preeminence because he got the nearest and was the absolute first to realize it was Brahman, thanks to Uma's direct instruction.
Okay, so the story delivers its message. Then the Upanishad shifts back to analogies, trying to help us grasp Brahman. What examples does it use now?
It gives two main illustrations. First, in verse 4.4, from the big picture of the cosmos, it uses the image of lightning.
Lightning.
Yeah, the splendor of lightning flashing forth, suddenly illuminating everything.
That conveys power, suddenness, brilliance. Maybe something you can't quite hold on to?
Exactly. Interpretations vary, maybe a single brilliant flash, or like the twinkling of an eye. Both convey that sense of sudden appearance, something beyond our normal grasp. Swami Guru Bhaktananda also mentions that Vedic tradition of drawing out vowel sounds like ah when experiencing Brahman. And there's even an interpretation that the flash, or maybe a wink from Brahman, was a subtle rebuke to the god's pride.
A cosmic wink. I like that. Okay, so that's the macrocosm. What about the microcosm, the individual?
Verse 4.5 gives the second illustration from within us. It compares Brahman to the flash of thoughts in the mind.
Flash of thoughts. How does that work?
It points to a few things. One, the mind's restlessness, how it seems to reach towards Brahman, trying to remember it, grasp it. Two, the way thoughts of Brahman might flash on and off quickly. And three, maybe deeper, how the aham vritti, the I thought, underlies all other thoughts, and how even fleeting thoughts carry the stamp of Brahman as the consciousness in which they arise.
So the very activity of our mind, its flickering nature, somehow points towards the underlying reality.
In a way, yes. The mind seeking rest in Brahman, the constant Aya consciousness, the transient nature of thoughts, they all reflect aspects of our relationship with Brahman. And it suggests that when thought momentarily ceases, that's when illumination can happen.
Those gaps between thoughts. Okay. Now, the Upanishad talks about Upasana's meditation methods related to these illustrations.
Right. Verses 4.4 and 4.5, the lightning and thought flash analogies, they aren't just descriptions. They're presented as upasanas, ways to meditate, to focus the mind on Brahman using these similes.
But wait, why introduce meditation techniques after the main teaching about Brahman seems to have been given? Wouldn't they normally come first as preparation?
That's a really astute question. It seems counterintuitive. Shankar tackles this. He says, yes, often upasana is preparation. But people come to this path differently. Sometimes a deep longing, a readiness for the knowledge arises first. The intellectual understanding might click into place. In that case, these upasanas can then serve as powerful ways to solidify that knowledge, to deepen it, internalize it, maybe by meditating on aspects of Brahman, focusing away from the ego.
So it accommodates different journeys. What's the basic principle behind Upasana?
It's essentially superimposition. You take a form, maybe an image, a name, concept like lightning, and you consciously superimpose the qualities of Brahman onto it. You meditate on the form as Brahman.
Like associating fire with heat and light.
Exactly. It's using a tangible focus to lift the mind towards the intangible, cultivating those divine qualities.
Does the Upanishad give other specific upasanas?
Yes. Verse 4.6 introduces Tadvanam. It means the adorable one, or that which is to be worshipped. It suggests meditating on Brahman by name, focusing on the joy and bliss associated with it.
Tadvanam, the adorable.
Then in 4.7, the disciple asks, have you told me the secret, the Upanishad? And the teacher confirms, yes, the core secret knowledge of Brahman has been imparted.
So the teaching is complete, and these are aids for practice. The text then wraps up by describing the foundations and fruits of this knowledge.
Right. Verse 4.8 talks about the edifice of Brahma Vidya, the structure supporting this wisdom. The foundations are given as tapas, austerity, discipline, dhamma, self-restraint, sense control, and karma, dedicated selfless work.
Tapas, dhamma, karma, practical supports.
Yeah. Tapas give strength, dhamma frees you from outer distractions, karma purifies the mind and past actions. The Vedas are called as limbs, like the pathways leading you to this core wisdom, and truth, Sakyam, is its abode.
Truth as the dwelling place.
Meaning a solid ethical foundation, honesty, nonviolence, the yamas is essential. Brahmavidya needs that truthful ground to really take root and flourish. It needs the right conditions, like a seed needs warmth and nourishment.
It's a whole ecosystem for spiritual growth, not just one thing. And finally, the payoff, the falastuti, the fruits.
Verse 4.9, the concluding verse. It states that one who truly knows this, knows Brahman, gets established in the highest state, limitless, heavenly, supreme. All sins are destroyed. This, the Upanishad declares, is the ultimate goal of human life, the greatest fruit you can attain.
Wow.
And it beautifully circles back to that core message of the Kena Upanishad. You attain Brahman by seeing him, experiencing him, and every thought, every perception, by focusing on that spiritual essence within all of creation.
That's a powerful conclusion. So after this incredibly rich deep dive, what are the main things you, our listener, should really take away from the Kena Upanishad?
Well, I think first, this idea of Brahman being beyond our senses, beyond our mind, yet somehow their very power illuminating them all, that's huge. Then the paradox of knowing. That true understanding often comes with admitting you don't know intellectually. That humility.
And in the stories of gods.
Yes, that vivid lesson about pride, about remembering we're instruments, not the ultimate doer.
Yeah.
And finally, the path itself, contemplation, yes, but also ethical living, discipline, seeing the sacred in the everyday.
It's been fascinating. And it really leaves us, and hopefully you, with a final thought to mull over, building on the Upanishad itself. Just consider right now that unseen power, the one animating your senses, your mind as you listen. What would it really mean truly to know that alone?
We really hope this inspires you to explore further the Upanishads, Vedanta. There's just so much depth there building on what we've touched on today. Keep digging.